questioned Malaysians whether they would be willing to pay more for using plastics and in the way of taxation, and they weren't that happy about it, right? Which also points us to the idea that perhaps we can think about this also as a societal problem, a problem that involves the way we understand our human behavior in society, right? If we think about this, obviously the first thing to do would be to get people aware, to make them understand that the way they are consuming plastics, the type of plastics that they are consuming perhaps is not the best in this case for the country, not so much, but for the planet, right? So in there, you will be looking at ideas that look at reducing consumption. And oftentimes that comes through the idea of bans, right? Banning something that we as a society don't want to see, right? And in that graph over there, I saw that many countries are actually banning, for example, this is just an example, plastic bags. And that's something positive, but what about the awareness? Again, from the same Ipsos data that was asking Malaysians about plastics, one of the interesting data that I found out is that only 56% of people that were interviewed were concerned about plastic. So you might ask them to reduce, you might ask them to pay more, but they might not actually really understand what's the purpose of that, and therefore not really want to comply with that measure, right? So the importance of awareness, education is also there. Now, is there a way to perhaps bring all of the solutions kind of together in a way that makes sense? Well, yes and no, but the more way to make sense is if we think about the system itself, the system that, let's say that you want to recycle or you want to reduce or you want to use different materials, but there's no options for recycling. You are forced to buy the only product that is there that pollutes. It's not only about you, it's about a comprehensive change of the system. This has different names, but one of the ones that is being promoted is circular economy, right? I'm not gonna go into all these ideas because I think they are ideas that you all know as you are probably in this conference because you care about these things, but is the idea of thinking about waste, which was the first, just already not generating the waste. And if we have to, then at least make it in the cycle for as long as possible. Okay, so this is a framework that allows us to understand a little bit better what is the problem with plastic pollution and how can we think about potential solutions. Right, as I'm only here as the moderator and the convener of this panel, I'm not gonna go talking and bothering you anymore. I will let the speakers to go deep into these ideas that I just briefly mentioned. Here you have the list of the speakers. We will start with Mrs. Laetania from Healthcare Without Harm. We'll continue with Mrs. Shantini with WWF-Malaysia. We'll continue with Dr. Gorka from the Spanish Agency for Food Safety and Nutrition, and with Narendran for Asia Pacific University. They will look at different aspects from consumption to recycling, safety of packaging, and the new technologies that can help us to recycle and reutilize plastics in a much better way. Before I leave the floor, I just forgot to introduce myself. And I know that's a bit rude, but I simply forgot. I'm Daniel Ruiz de Garibay. I teach sustainability at Asia Pacific University. So if you want to visit us, we are down the road, 20 minutes from here. I've been working very much with engineer Narendran, who is here with us, on the idea of how can we um, move towards circularity with plastics, and we are about to start a project in Sabah that is hopefully being financed by the British Council that looks at bringing together the community and working in a project for circularity with plastics. Right, thank you very much. I'll pass the floor to the first speaker. This is Laetania, the floor is yours.
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here to share a little bit about plastics from the healthcare perspective. So, okay, it's loaded. Thank you. My name is Belai Djandam. I'm from Indonesia, and I'm the climate officer for Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia. For those who may not know about our organization, we are an international nonprofit organization, and we work to transform the healthcare sector worldwide to reduce its oh, Okay. To reduce its environmental footprint, to become a community anchor for sustainability, and to be a leader in the global movement for environmental health and justice. I see that one of the key roles of our organization is bridging this world of health with many climate and environmental oriented issues, to try and situate it from a health point of view, see what the contributions from the sector is, and what role do we play in addressing this. And plastics is one of the key concerns for us this year. So today I wanted to share a little bit about some of the work that we are doing in terms of managing plastics from a healthcare setting, how the sector is contributing to the problem, but in equally what opportunities are there from the healthcare sector that can help to address the wider issue of plastics and health. Slide. The issue with healthcare is that plastics is everywhere. We see it in our gloves, we see it in our oxygen masks, we see it in our IV bottles, our syringes, our food packaging. They are ubiquitous in healthcare. And this is a concern because we are dealing with fundamentally toxic materials right where people come to heal. And studies have repeatedly shown how pervasive and damaging these plastics can be. I'm not going to go into much detail because I think there will be a speaker who will talk about this, but we know that the chemicals found inside plastics can leak into our skin, can go inside our bodies, and they are directly linked with serious health conditions, including endocrine disruptions, insulin resistance, weight gain, and even potentially leading to cancer. The second concern is that the healthcare sector is helping to sustain the plastic industry because we are a major consumer. We did a waste audit in 2019 with hospitals in the Philippines and in Indonesia, and you can find the findings here. We saw the significance of plastics in the healthcare waste stream, representing between 46 to 72% of the total waste that is produced in the hospitals. And as healthcare providers, it's essential to recognize that our use of plastic directly contributes to this toxic cycle. Next slide. And beyond the healthcare setting, we also know that the entire life cycle of plastics, from production to use to treatment to disposal, all of it is harmful. It's choking our rivers and oceans. It's causing ecological damage. And we know that ultimately, the ill health of our environment will come back to harm human health and well being. And we know, oh, sorry. And then we also know that the strong link between the plastic industry and the fossil fuel industry is also one of the reasons why it's such a challenging issue to address. Daniel mentioned already that over 98% of plastics are made from fossil fuels, specifically oil and gas. So it is a part of the fossil fuel industry. And one of the major reasons why it's so hard for us to let go of this dependency to plastics is because of the myths and misconceptions that the fossil fuel industry has been perpetuating for many, many years. And one of the biggest myths that we know is they market single-use plastics as hygienic, as clean, and as good for our health, when in reality they are made of toxic chemicals that are literally poisoning our bodies. And we know that it has severe damage towards people's health. And the fossil fuel industry is also fueling with so much fear of the unknown and misconception. And I think it's so deeply rooted to the point that it is years of conditioning and behavior that has led us to where we are now in the healthcare sector and our relationship with the plastic industries. So these are narratives that we have to understand and challenge if we want to be able to address the plastic issues both within and also beyond the healthcare sector. Now, in order to challenge these narratives, our call from Healthcare Without Harm is how do we put health at the center of these discussions? It's important that we frame the issue of plastics not just as an environmental issue, but as a critical health issue. Because by doing this, we transform something that initially may be seen as an isolated environmental problem into a pervasive health crisis that directly impacts each and every one of us. And an example I can give is not everyone can relate, for example, to the plastics polluting the Ciliwung River in Bogor, Indonesia, which is where I'm from and right by my house. But more people can relate to the concerns of microplastics contaminating the food that we eat every day. So by using the health argument, we close this gap in understanding and we add proximity. So there's a sense of urgency and relatability. And if we fail to highlight these health impacts, the true costs often becomes externalized. And this not only diminishes the urgency of the problem, but it also makes it even harder for us to hold corporates and companies accountable for the pollution that they have created. So it's about making the invisible visible and ensuring that the health implications of plastic pollutions is recognized as a shared and immediate concern. And since this is a health issue, who better to talk about this than the healthcare professionals themselves? They are uniquely positioned to combat plastic pollution because they know well the health impacts and they can take action to protect public health. And this won't be the first time that healthcare professionals have been involved in transformations of societal changes, but coming in it from a health lens, whether it's geopolitics, whether it's environmental issues, social justice, racial equity, women's rights, and the plastic issue should not be any different. In Healthcare Without Harm, we manage the RISE Southeast Asia Alliance for Health and Climate, which is essentially a network of health professionals who are championing issues of health equity and climate justice. In the Philippines, we have HACCP, which is a group of doctors and prominent medical organizations working to combat air pollution, climate, and health. In Indonesia, we have Kabumi, Kesehatan untuk Bumi, which is also a group of health professionals from doctors, public health specialists, opticians, who are working to empower other healthcare professionals to understand and be able to advocate for the climate and health issues. And the reason why healthcare professionals should be seen as a key stakeholder is because they have something that not everybody have, which is trust. People trust healthcare professionals. When doctors speak, people tend to listen. So imagine if we leverage on that trust and the role that they can play in communicating all of these trusted, credible information about health and plastics in relation, we might be able to mobilize and touch the hearts of the people. And in addition to that, the reason why we also need to be centering health at the in the discussions on plastics is because we can be a model to transition away from plastics. The healthcare sector represents 10% of the global economy, and we have the potential to model how do we transition away from fossil fuels and toxic chemicals. And we can lead by example, and we can show how sustainable practices can be integrated effectively without compromising safety or efficacy. Finally, what are the vehicles for change? First one, of course, is that we have um, implementable actions that we can do within our own healthcare facilities. We can improve understanding of plastics in healthcare, compliance with the very highest of standards without delay and without exemption, redesigning plastic medical products and their packaging, auditing our plastics use, and implementation and capacity building, including monitoring and evaluation of policies that we can implement. But of course, we also have to be looking out for false solutions. And I've tried to outline some of this. One of it is the false promise of recycling. Daniel already went over that. The attractions to bio-based or biodegradable plastic options or alternatives to plastics, which might work in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't actually tackle the root of the problem. And then we also know that incineration, co-incineration, waste to energy equipments, and chemical recycling, this is in that process of eliminating the waste, these processes cause much more harm, and the toxics and pollutants that can affect especially vulnerable populations who may be living around incineration or chemical recycling facilities. We also have to account for the health impacts of that. So another one that we offer for facilities worldwide is the GGHH network, or the Global Green and Healthy Hospitals Network, which is over 1,600 institutional members internationally, hospitals, healthcare system, organization who are committed to the 10 sustainability goals, and this includes chemicals and waste, which is very relevant to the plastics discussion. So in Malaysia, we have the Sunwave Velocity Medical Center as one of our members, and anyone can sign up and access the resources that we have, and this includes the sustainable procurement in the health sector resource, and other resources about plastics and health, including a plastic audit tool. And of course, as we talk about plastics, we also know that there is an ongoing global plastics treaty being negotiated, a legally binding international agreement on plastics. And our call from Healthcare Without Harm is that there should not be any exemptions for healthcare in the Global Plastics Treaty, and that health has to be woven into the narrative to make sure that us, as one of the major consumers of plastic, are not continuing to contribute to plastic pollution. And we as healthcare professionals also have to be using our trusted voice to challenge the status quo and to create new definitions of health safety standards that currently are favoring the use of plastics. And I also want to note that when we use health as an argument, contentious issues often can become depoliticized because we are all having a shared value. So by leveraging on the role of health professionals, I think we can make reduction of plastics use something that is universally accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? All right. And we have 5 minutes, so try to keep your minutes.
I know that like a really big concern is like the disposability element and like the safety element. Are there any solutions for that now, or anything that you know of that's like a work in progress that kind of addresses that?
Maybe we'll take all the questions first.
Hi, my name is Tulsi, and some of the work that I've done is around climate and mental health. And one of our outcomes is that practitioners are incredibly overwhelmed, stressed from having to keep up with all of the changes that our industry is enforcing on them. And so my question is, have you faced this sort of pushback from them, and how did you handle it?
Hi, my name is Rong Hui, and I'm working on healthcare sustainability as well. I'm wondering about if you could talk more about the product redesign for to minimize plastic use, because that, from my understanding, is still quite in early stage. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, thanks so much. That was really a great presentation. I just wondered, my name's Owen, and I was just wondering about incineration and whether there's kind of plastic incineration, and if that's an issue that you're taking on as well.
Right.
Lots of questions. I do have to give a disclaimer that I not fully leading some of the sustainability work within our organization, but I will try to answer the best to my knowledge. So the first question was around disposability and safety elements of plastics. Any solutions for that now, and if there is anything work on progress? I think in terms of safety elements of plastics, I also know that there are many different materials that are being used, and obviously there are standards that are being created in terms of what like medical grade plastics and things like that needs to be tackled. But in terms of the disposability element, I think one of the key issues is that, for example, if we're trying to recycle the recyclability of some of the medical equipments, that's definitely one of the key issues that we need to consider, because there are things that simply cannot be reused anymore, right? And even when we try to do recycling, sometimes cross-contamination happens and segregation within the waste happens, which makes it difficult to continue to recycle. So what I can say is that we are trying to for example, our participation in the Global Plastics Treaty is trying to help address that from the healthcare setting to make sure that any policies and recommendations is applicable, because it's also not like a universal solution for all, and there's a lot of exceptions in the healthcare world that needs to be addressed. But I would also say that there's also a lot of hesitancy in learning about plastics, especially when we're working with hospitals and healthcare facilities. So the audit waste that we did in 2019, we're very thankful for the 5 hospitals who agreed to do it, because some hospitals do not want to have a plastic audit happen there. So I would say that we also need to be working on better understanding where exactly the sources of our plastics waste are from. And from that, we can then design interventions that fit to the context of maybe the country or the region or the facilities itself. So that's what I can say to answer your question. And then your question about climate and mental health, I also wanted to mention that if you're aware of the Connecting Climate Minds work, Healthcare Without Harm is actually, yeah, good. We're the Southeast Asian one. So we were the regional co-convener and kind of a part of the early facilitation and discussions around what healthcare practitioners feel around climate and health, and particularly climate and mental health. I would say not a pushback, but maybe more of um, ignorance and lack of community. I think that's something that we've been learning from, especially from our work with the RISE Southeast Asia Alliance for Climate and Health, is that there's not a lot of, there's not really a health community, for example, in Indonesia that is fully aware of the climate and health relationship. And so there's not a movement that people feel they can join. So I think often healthcare professionals might feel like they're alone in the fight. And so what we're trying to do with the alliance is to make it visible that there are so many programs, projects, initiatives that are happening across the region, and they should be able to have uh, what's WADA, like a container to kind of connect everything together. So that's something that we are seeing. I don't think there's pushback from the healthcare professionals themselves, but something that we also hear from our RISE members is pushback from the leadership team. So a lot of the times that when we're trying to make these changes happen, it has to also involve some kind of policy level change. And the hospital leadership team might not necessarily agree for whatever reason, economic, social, complexity. So it's also a matter of how do we gain the trust of the leadership team? How do we raise their awareness about these issues? How do we convince them to buy in to the to the sustainable solutions that we are trying to promote through the work of the GGHH and RISE members? So I hope that helps. And then product design. I'm also not very familiar with this, but I think there has been some initiatives, for example, with hospital gowns that are initially from plastics that are now being replaced with reusable gowns that can be washed, I think 75 to up to 100 times. So within the hospitals, we have critical equipment, semi-critical equipments, and non-critical equipments, and that's like, for example, stethoscopes or things like that. So I think if we work in the categories of that, we can also try to redesign in terms of what's critical and what's semi or non-critical. And usually the question then is like, is it possible to completely like eliminate plastics from facilities? And I would say that we won't be able to fully truly go zero waste, because there will always be some kind of biohazardous waste that has to be eliminated. But there's a lot that we can do in changing the design and changing the consumption, the procurement, and things like that, that can really, really help reduce our plastic pollution. Another thing in terms of not really product redesign, but also initiatives that some hospitals are trying to do is in alternatives. And I was saying that as a false solution because it doesn't necessarily tackle the root of the problem. So we see sometimes hospitals are transitioning from plastic cups to paper cups to provide water for patients and staff and everything. And it's not necessarily healthier or safer for the patient and the environment. It still produces waste, definitely, but more effective policies can be put in place. So things like encouraging staff to bring water bottles can be one way, or providing free water through glass or things like that, that can be a way for us to just also redesign the operations of the hospital itself. So I would say it still needs a lot of studying because we also need to look at what is feasible for different hospitals and the context and the socioeconomic background of that hospital. But there are definitely bright spots in terms of redesigning. And then incineration. What was your question again? I forget. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, incineration, chemical recycling, these are marketed as recycling techniques, but what is not being accounted for is the health impacts of the process of incineration itself. So all of the, smoke and toxins and chemicals and pollutants that come out of that process of incineration is affecting the air quality. And I think Healthcare Without Harm started in the US, and one of our key initial initiatives was to get rid of incineration because we are looking at so much of the health impacts for populations living around the incineration facilities. Of course, it's not like an instant solution. Not every hospital can immediately change into autoclaves, for example, but we also need to be aware that there are health impacts that we need to take into account in terms of incineration. And it's not just like our waste goes away and that's it. There's also the health impacts that comes from that process. And again, that's only the disposal side of it. There's also health impacts in every single stage of the life cycle of plastics, from production to use, to treatment, to the disposal itself. So how do we better understand the different health impacts and take that into account when we're talking about the cost of plastics? It's not just polluting our environments, it's also polluting our bodies or bloodstreams and things like that.
Thank you very much. We are running a little bit behind the schedule, so let's just keep the discussions if needed for later on. All right, now we move on to the next speaker from WWF.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shantini. I'm with WWF-Malaysia. Happy to be. Hi. Okay. I'm blind, so bear with me as we go through this presentation. I am glad to be here, but I'm actually stepping in on behalf of a colleague who unfortunately fell ill and had to pull out yesterday. So I am here to present on behalf and in collaboration with my colleague Sahira. So WWF is a conservation-based organization, and our ultimate goal is to address nature, the triple threats, right? Planetary crisis, whether it's pollution, whether it's biodiversity loss, and climate change. And ultimately, how can we create a world where people live in harmony with nature? And we do this by intervening and creating projects along conservation, along intervening in markets, trying to transition towards sustainability through education and even policy and advocacy. Let's do a quick health scan of our planet in terms of how we're faring in terms of plastics. We heard some before, but WWF as a network has come up with various tools with partners, and what this does is to pool together resources across different published and unpublished work, which can then, mostly published work, which provides us a picture. So this is the scale of mismanaged plastics across the globe, and we can see concentrations in this region as well as in other developing worlds, as well as developed worlds. Next, please. And this is where now we see emissions from rivers, right? So if this is your arteries, it's clogging your arteries, right? So it's similar to that. Next, please. And lastly, we see this all ends up as floating alien substances in our marine environment or in our environment in itself. And ultimately, we rely on nature to provide us with air, with food, with water, and the soil, the air, the water, all of these have been contaminated with some form or another of plastics. And inadvertently, we are then consuming, inhaling, ingesting plastics of sorts. And it's great to see that there's increasing number of evidence to indicate how this will in turn affect our health. Next, please. So I am guessing this is a slide to show you how flexible plastics are. So it's revolutionized markets, demand and supply, how we consume and how we produce, and how we view economics in the sense of needs versus wants has also continued to evolve with this introduction of plastics across the different sectors. It's almost as if we can't live without plastics, right? Because it's changed and made our lives much convenient, but at what cost? Next, please. So this is just a couple of pictures to indicate. Please do tell me if my slides and what I'm saying don't match or don't add up. I'm assuming there are two pictures behind me, right? Yes, excellent. So for those of you who are Malaysians, you'll probably see this image, which is quite common, right? Dilarang membuang sampah di sini. For those of you who are not Malaysians, it's basically signboard, signages throughout Malaysia where you find this board which says, do not throw rubbish here. That's what the board says, and that's what you get. And then you have, so what this picture, it's a story that I'm trying to share, that when we talk about waste, we talk about plastics, we have to think about beyond what manifests on photos, right? It's intention versus accident. At times, it's intentional. The fact that it says, please don't do it, and that's where you do it. And at times, it's accidental, right? Because the nature of plastics is such, if a plastic wrapper for a sweet starts floating in the air and wind blows it, are you going to run after it and catch it and say, hey, come back? No, right? It's going to probably end up in some part of our sewer system or some part in the drainage. And this can end up contributing towards clogs. And we have had flash floods resulting from this, which then has its own spin-off effects, right? Other sorts of social and environmental costs. Next, please. So these is another two photos with, on the front of it, what do we see? Okay, so Malaysia was one of the countries that was reported to have high volumes of imports of plastic waste back in 2018, 2019, when China had sort of halted its import of plastic waste for recycling and so forth. And the other picture is about pollution in the coast. No, so now here, the story is slightly different. It's not just about the choices we've made, but it's also why those choices have come about. Now, is it merely for economic gain? Maybe yes, when you talk about import, export, and trade, but also we speak of recycling as a solution. But for the recycling industry to also sustain its sector, it requires sufficient amount of materials to be recycled. So that's one reason that the industry would put forward as to why we still rely on imports until we can get our waste segregation and supply chain sorted in terms of recycling. And the other marine coastal debris issue, it represents, one, the transboundary nature of plastic waste. Did it truly come? So this photo is taken in Sabah, where I was actually born, in an area close to where I was born. And did all this plastic end up there because Sabah, the residents of the area contributed to it, or was it carried by currents? Second, there is an untold story about islands. Or less heard of stories of islands where there are issues with respect to access to clean drinking water, right? Because there are no freshwater systems or drilling of wells are limited. So then there is also the need to balance the need of plastic production, consumption, use versus providing clean and drinking water. So these are narratives which are around. So do we go about in the short term trying to address drinking water needs versus contemplating the implications, ramification of waste management as well, or other more rainwater harvesting systems for long-term solutions in terms of addressing. So what are the trade-offs when we make decisions in terms of addressing other societal challenges, right? So when you look at this picture, it does not necessarily represent that, but this is where it's coming from, and we need to be aware of that because no single size solution can fix all our plastic problems. It would be great if we could ban, we could eliminate, we could phase out a lot of things, but it may not work in certain circumstances. So how can we constructively address this? Next, please. Yeah, great. Now where am I? Sorry? Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Yes, see, I got carried away with my own. Okay, so it comes back to this has already been covered. with respect to pollution, I think Daniel as well as Belai had already covered this. So primary production. So we speak about pollution, but a lot of the times the solutions are coming from, or the suggestions or the intention of solving the problem is coming further down the stream with respect to waste management. How often do we think about preventing the problem from further exacerbating, right? But those are questions which are, no, we can't go there because we need to grow. We need to grow. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what others are saying. So this notion of perpetual need for growth is driving certain industries, and we need to rethink how we define growth in that extent, right? When we say sustainability, we say balancing interests. What do we really mean by that? So that's something we need to rethink as well. Next, please. Right. This is, okay, so, all right, I'm just going to continue my presentation and hope the slides match up. So basically what we're trying to indicate is in Malaysia, Malaysia is one of the, Malaysians are one of the highest plastic consumers per capita. I hope this is the graph. It's that we are at 16 kilos per capita. Next, when we look at solid waste composition in Malaysia, plastic is one of the second. It's after food waste, and I believe there's another session where we are addressing this. So we see a high consumption-driven issue. We also see a high waste management, waste composition issue. Next, please. Next. Okay. Thanks. All right. So this is what happens when you. Okay. Oh, it's still there. Next, please. So now we come to this topic which we much heard about earlier, right? So we have all this plastic pollution and all these waste issues. So is bioplastics the silver bullet? Is this the solution? Is there a difference between bioplastics, biodegradables, and degradables? Yes, no? Is it clear? Are the lines clear between these three? Is it important that they be clear? The next, please. So this is a chart which actually depicts how ambiguous the world or the realm is when it comes to these three thematic areas, these thematic components of conservation of the plastics. And if we don't get clarity, either through policy or through laws globally, what would happen is a lot of further problems could be well hidden within labels such as bioplastics, biodegradable, and degradable, and so forth. Because, next please. As some of these plastics, bioplastics, or degradables do break down, some of them do still contribute towards pollution. Some of them still have plastics, and we need to seriously think about the trade-offs between these bioplastics because we have issues of food security and so forth, right? So next, please. As WWF-Malaysia as an organization, what we are saying is that we're not saying plastics are bad as a whole. Nor are we saying that we need to phase out plastic. Nor are we saying bioplastics or a certain biodegradable element is what we need. But what we are saying is this: we need to rethink the way we work when it comes to addressing plastic pollution. We need to prioritize, and we spoke about different use cases in the health sector. Similarly, within our daily lives, there are various use cases in terms of plastics. What is necessary? What is unnecessary? What is high risk? Can we not come to some form of consensus? Can we not come to some form of agreement and say, yes, we can do without it? We used to live without a lot of these things, but now we just find new opportunities to create. Next, please. So then World Bank has indicated, like I think again, Daniel has touched on this, that there is a lot of waste in generating waste, right? So you're generating more economic waste and loss by letting pollution take place, because now you also have incurred costs in terms of recovery, but you have raw material waste in itself. And in this region, we suffer quite a significant amount, 24 billion ringgit in terms of value lost by plastics. And in Malaysia alone, we lose about 1 million tons annually. Next, please. So as the moderator have kindly started out with this framing of circular economy, WWF Malaysia, through our our markets program, we engage with businesses, with the industry in trying to help facilitate movement towards circular economy. So we're looking at phasing out, phasing down, safe management and handling of plastic waste, and also identifying what we can and cannot, what we can start to look towards banning of water. Next, please. The short video, which will nicely encapsulate what my colleague who couldn't be here wants to say about what we truly do in WWF in trying to address plastic. Can you play that, please?
Plastic is the most versatile man-made creation known to our planet. However, plastic waste is choking our planet. It is tearing apart the very fabric of life by polluting the water, soil, and the air we all need to survive. Approximately 12.7 million tons of plastic enter the ocean every year. Over 800 species are negatively impacted by plastic waste. But we are only just starting to understand the effects of plastic on our ecosystems. The packaging industry is the main user of plastic, accounting for 36% of global plastic demand. And Malaysia has one of the highest per capita plastic packaging consumption at 16.78 kilograms. Our current processes are not equipped to handle the immense volume of plastic packing entering our systems. So, what can we do? We need to reimagine how we source, design, dispose of, and reuse the plastic we all depend on. And that's just what WWF's No Plastic in Nature by 2030 vision aims to do by, firstly, addressing the source and eliminating unnecessary plastic. Secondly, developing action plans to double plastic recovery. Thirdly, shifting to sustainable alternate sources of plastic. However, we can't do this alone. We need the combined efforts of governments, businesses, and the public to intervene and identify areas for improvement. WWF-Malaysia is engaging the government and industry stakeholders to advocate for better policies to combat plastic pollution, such as eliminating unnecessary and problematic single-use plastics, introducing mandatory extended producer responsibility (EPR) for packaging waste, and supporting the Global Plastics Treaty. And we need companies, brand owners, and retailers to take the lead to transition towards a circular economy. Find out how you can start your circular economy journey. Contact us now.
Very quickly to the next slide. We recently just commissioned a study, concluded a study which we are finalizing, and the main objectives was towards addressing single use of high-risk plastics, plastics that pose a risk to nature, environment, and health, and so forth. That was the objectives. We engaged with stakeholder groups, as you can see, a wide range of stakeholder groups. And I'm sorry, I don't think the health sector is there. So maybe for future reference. Next, please. So what I want to highlight is not the findings. So the findings is being finalized in terms of what consensus has been attained in terms of what should be banned, phased out, and so forth. But the challenges are what I'm interested to highlight, because now this is what is curbing and halting progress further, right? So there's a lot of consumer behavior. I think this also was touched by Daniel earlier. A lot of the stakeholders we engaged, although they came in the capacity of either industry player or even standard setters and so forth, they could not remove their consumer tax. So they all saw it as a drastic inconvenience that would be brought about if certain things would be phased out or certain things would have to be done without. Because, as I said, life as we know it has been permanently changed. The other thing is we also increasingly see newer forms of plastic use being introduced, and some of which seem highly unnecessary and of high risk in nature. So all these risks are happening while we are still pursuing negotiations, discussions, policy deliberations these are the threats that continue to persist and continue to impact how we proceed. Next, please. So this is where you can find additional resources of what we have produced in WWF-Malaysia. Next is another video which I'm going to quickly skip through because I believe Belai has already touched about the global treaty. Next, please. So I just want to highlight the INCs, which is the negotiations that are happening in terms of developing a new global plastics treaty. And the process is such where we are at the fourth session of negotiating a text for global plastics treaty. There has been language on on health interest peppered within this new draft text, but negotiations are still underway. And so it would be immensely useful for different segments of society and civil society, as well as academic and experts to contribute towards this process, to even the level playing field when it comes to decision making. What we see is sometimes uneven representation of information when it comes to making deliberations. So if some group says that, yes, we need to ban ABC, some groups will come and say toxic levels in certain additives are high and it's going to pose health risk. Then we sometimes have pushback and say, is there evidence? Is there clear evidence to say that this is what we need to do? And sometimes that's what's missing. So there needs to be more involvement and more information that is funneled into these processes. Next, please. So what we do want to see from INC4, which is happening next week, actually, the second last series of negotiations prior to hopefully a conclusion of the text at the fifth INC, is that we do have some binding provisions. We do set momentum into sessions where we can have health approaches being featured, as what Belai has said earlier, and also right to clean and healthy environment, a life cycle approach to addressing the problem of public plastic pollution, and so forth. Next. Here are some additional resources we can find, which we have made in conjunction with the treaty work as well. That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shantini, for this wonderful overview, the problem of plastics. I'm going to ask you a favor. If you have questions, note them down, because we're not going to take questions now. We are running a little bit down on time, and I'm afraid we won't have time for the next speakers otherwise. So take note of your questions and we ask them later on. Now I pass the floor to Dr. Gorka Ruiz de Garibay, who is going to present on plastics and how they relate to our health when they are in contact with food. He comes from the Spanish Food Security Agency, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm very glad that we had the previous presentation because we are going to speak about very similar topics. And also there was this suggestion that Malaysia is going to ban single-use plastics. So I'm going to talk exactly what happens when you ban single-use plastics in a region that has already done that. Okay, so I will also skip some of my slides that the concepts have been already said. Where's my phone?
It's move already.
So yeah, there is a big demand on plastic in general, but also, as it's been mentioned already, the main purpose is for food packaging in food packaging industry. Okay, and also there is this concept that plastic that is used for packaging is more prone to produce waste than other kind of plastics because it's more fragile. Okay, so it's also been mentioned that the plastic is polluting the environment, and also most of the pollution that we find at beaches and at the ocean is single-use plastic. Okay, and in this study from 2017, they defined exactly what objects were found as trash. Okay, and on the top most common items, all of these are related to food packaging. And on top of that, these are also related or are going to be used with food, yeah, even if they are not packaging by itself. All these concepts in food safety we call food contact material. Okay, and food contact material is defined as any material or article that is intended to be in contact with food and drinks. This includes food processing equipment, packaging, containers, kitchen utensils, knives, dishes, and so on. It can be made from a variety of materials, but unfortunately, and if we focus on packaging, the majority is made of plastic. Although paper is quite common also. Okay? So considering that plastic from packaging is very futile and is polluting the oceans, the European uh, uh, um, politicians banned the use of single-use plastics from a few categories that are drawn here since 2019. This has started to be applied in 2021. Okay, cotton bud plastic sticks made of plastic, single-use plastic for forks, dishes, plastic straw, plastic sticks to hold balloons, plastic stirrers, food and beverage containers, those that are made of expanded polyester, and plastic bags, especially the kind that are made of oxo-degradable plastics that are the main producers of microplastics. So if you pay attention, most of them belong to this category of food contact materials, okay? So together with this ban, the EU is recommending that sustainable alternatives are used, but also it says that food hygiene and safety has to be kept, okay? Why is this? Because even if some packaging may look like it's not needed, packaging has a function. Packaging has a function of containing the food, has a function of providing convenience to the consumers, for transportation and so on, and also provides a function of communication. We can print information there, but the main function that we cannot get rid of it is the protection of the food. Okay. So how does packaging protect the food? So here in this graph we have on the right the food, on the left the environment, and on the middle packaging. Packaging is a barrier between food and environment. It's trying to avoid transmissions of materials from the environment to the food, and this includes mainly oxygen, moisture, carbon dioxide, and other gases. Some of these materials that can be transferred to the food are not damaging the safety of the food, but some, for example, the moisture is promoting microbial growth. Okay, the other way around, food has components that can be transferred to the environment, like the water and the CO2. Okay, but also the packaging itself can transfer materials to the food, and this includes maybe components that provide of flavor, but also components that could be toxic. Okay, but the other way around, food can transfer components to the packaging, and this can result in a loss of flavor, but also in a damaging of the package, and also the package is losing this protective function. Okay, so when we think about alternatives to plastic, we have to think also how we are keeping the function of protecting the food. Okay, so avoiding microbial growth and also avoiding the toxic components in the packaging is transferred to the food. So the industry of packaging is moving into paper. More than 2/3 of the alternatives to plastic are paper or paper analogs. Okay? If we think about paper, we may think that paper is composed of cellulose fibers, but it's not only that. There are many other components in the paper, like fillers, with, for example, calcium carbonate, kaolin, talc, sizing agents, like starch, polyvinyl alcohols, dyes and pigments in there to provide it colors, and some coatings that we will see later that are used for changing the permeability of the paper. Those are, for example, biowax or polylactic acid. And it has already been seen that some of these coatings are a source of toxic compounds like PFAs. On top of that, the chemical composition of the paper is not homogeneous. Some producers can produce paper with some components, and maybe even they don't know what are exactly the components of the paper. And also paper and board are commonly printed, glued, dyed, and labeled. These are more chemical compounds that can also be transferred to the food. Okay, so what are the pros of paper as an alternative to plastic? It's a renewable material. It's biodegradable and compostable. It has a long tradition as packaging, mainly for food that are dry. But if they are treated with coating, it can be expanded the application to liquids and fatty food. What are the cons of paper? It's a very porous material with low barrier properties. And also for this reason, there are more chances that chemicals in the paper are transferring to the food more than with the plastics, okay? And also with the coating, printing, and the rest that is not paper itself. But also the main problem is that there is a lack of good manufacturing practices and a lack of inspection and control. Right now, at least in Europe, there is a strict regulation of food grade plastic. So all of the plastic is being tested and no chemicals, at least what is scientifically known. No toxins are transferred to food, but we cannot assure the same for the paper that is produced. Okay? Paper is also very interesting because in comparison to plastic, that is only 9% is recycled. In paper, up to 70% is recycled right now. But what are the problems with recycling paper and using for food contact material? In the waste streams, many types of paper are collected: newspapers, magazines, copy paper, thermal paper, and there are a lot of chemicals mixed with this paper that cannot be, well, the different types of paper cannot be separated, so they have to be recycled together. And since there are chemicals there, some of them are hazardous. And it's already known that if packaging is produced from recycled paper, this is transferred to food. Okay. And what are these chemicals that have been described, like mineral oil, bisphenols that are also in plastics, and phthalates that are also in plastics, and some photoinitiators. So these are very toxic. So as a summary, food packaging is the main source of plastic waste pollution, and food industry is moving to sustainable materials, probably due to bans. But packaging can transfer hazards to food. This is known for plastic and is being addressed, and now food grade plastic is fine. But for its alternative, there is a lack of regulation, and we don't know. So the idea here is that as we move away from plastic packaging, where do we want to head? To packaging that look like this and is doing this to our food, or something that is safe for food use, right? So there is and I think this is something the European Union is lacking. At the same time as single-use plastic was forbidden, there should be already in place regulation for its alternative, and that is missing. So yeah, if you have any question.
Oh, I think we are going to move to the next speaker, and if you have any questions, we'll take them afterwards, because I think we were supposed to finish in 20 minutes. So let's just let Narendra speak. So Narendra comes from Asia Pacific University, and he's an engineer working, among other things, with drones. And he's going to speak about how technology can help us dealing with the plastic dilemma. Floor is yours. Hi, I'm Naren. So I'm going to talk about plastics. I'm not going to go anywhere there. So I want to start by talking about, I think a lot of speakers have talked about the pernicious nature of plastics. And I think everyone knows plastics are bad. But on the flip side, we also know we can't live without plastics, right? I mean, the reality of it is everything we wear, do, involves plastics now. And to envision a world without plastics, it's a bit ambitious without like what Dr. Gorka said just now. Without thinking of the alternatives, we shouldn't be too ambitious. And right now, that's what we are doing in a lot of things, right? So next. I'm talking about the different types of technologies we currently use to recycle plastics. Now, it's not a magic pill. We are in the process of transitioning. And the process of transitioning, what's important is managing our expectations and managing the resources that we're trying to eradicate. So in this case, when you're moving from single-use plastics or plastics in general, we still have to cope with the population, especially not just in Malaysia, but around the world. There are countries which are going to take time to take that transition. So how are we going to manage the plastic which is currently in the ecosystem? That's basically what we are working with currently. There are various different technologies, but the main way or method to recycle plastic is mechanical recycling, which is basically taking it up, putting it in a blender, a simplification of the actual process, and actually blending it into its raw, smaller components. So how small you want, it depends on your grind size and your burr size, things like that. Now, we have developed technologies to make it smarter because let's face it, one of the main problems of mechanical recycling is the labor force required. Because plastic, which is being recycled, comes from the source is dirty. And people don't like to deal with cleaning it and then drying it up. So what's the alternatives? In Malaysia, speaking honestly, most of the cleaning work is not done by Malaysians. And that has been one of the main reasons why when you talk about a cleanup effort in a beach, for example, it has to come from volunteers who do it for the TikTok photo or the Insta photo, which they take at the end. But no one's going to do that on a daily basis, right? So the idea is, especially in a lot of places in the world, they've actually moved on towards automating it. And that's also the kind of things which we are looking at. So to clean and segregate plastics, we're looking at technologies which can be used to automate the process. And these technologies are not new, but they have taken a leap in terms of their capabilities. So technologies like robotics or AI used to be, fantasyland technology, but nowadays these are mainstream technologies. You go to Germany, this is mainstream there. Everyone does this. You go to the Netherlands, for example, this is how status quo is. But in a lot of countries in this part of the world, we haven't transitioned towards using this in this kind of environments. And that's what we are looking at. Other than mechanical plastics, mechanical recycling, we also can, we're also looking at talking about the raw material we get. So the raw material we get from mechanical recycling is basically those small pellets, you see. But they can actually be used in a variety of ways. And the economical usage differs. I mean, you don't really need to make a plastic bag into another plastic bag. That's the whole idea behind it, right? Then, especially when you're talking about marine plastics, I'll talk about that, it loses its value once it's in the ocean. So there's no point in actually trying to reclaim commercial value of a marine plastic bag, for example. But there are other alternatives we can look at, right? And that's what we are talking about mostly nowadays. Next. So this is chemical recycling, and
I'm an engineer by trade, so I tend to be rational about things. Now, we can break down plastic into its baseline by using chemicals. Will there be a side effects? Obviously, right? Because you're using chemicals. But the point is, we are not going to be using all these recycled plastics for food or for sensitive use. We are going to be making things like handphone covers, things which do not require it to be near sensitive material, right? So for all those uses, we can talk about using chemicals, for example, chemical recycling, where instead of talking about plastics as a single-use material, we can mix around plastics. Because once you're at the chemical composition level, you can play with the molecules and come up with new materials. Because that's, at the end of the day, is the goal. The goal is not to replace, but the goal is to reuse a waste stream into something usable. So I think for that purpose, chemical recycling works. But when you start going into pyrolysis and things like that, then that's a bit gray territory, really. And we don't really see a point in doing that because the energy margin or the energy yield actually is not that sufficient. Next. Biological recycling, like what was talked about just now, is true enough. The idea of using enzymes to eat away plastics is something which is perfectly nice to have in a Nature article. But when you talk about it in reality, it's a bit difficult because it involves a lot of things, especially most of these things involve food material. And when it comes to food material, there are repercussions which you are not going to see in about 10 years. You're probably going to see 50 or 100 years. So that's something which is very sensitive. But as I said before, we can find use for it in things which are not of critical use. So that's the direction to go. These are currently the projects which are currently being used, the technologies to recover it. If you know, that's the interceptor. If you are in Malaysia, you go to the Klang River, you can see that as a permanent fixture. The reason it's a permanent fixture is, if you remember the WWF slides just now, Malaysia is the #1 contributor of plastics. Our Klang River is one of the most polluted rivers in the world. And that's one of the reasons why that startup project was installed there. So that's a ship which sails around the river. It's like an open mouth, which is like an open filter, which filters out bottles at the end of the day. These other installations are different installations, boom types of installations to collect plastics around the world. There are different places in the world. Next. So in APU, like Dr. Daniel talked about just now, we are working with a project where we are talking about decentralized plastic collection. Like I said before, plastics, especially in the ocean, we talk about PET bottles in the beach. When you take them and you try to recycle them, there's mold inside, the color is no longer white, it's very hard to recycle it. But we can recycle it as a new material for a new use case. So that's what we are talking about. We're talking about taking these raw materials, grinding it down, and then turning it into works of art, works for other purposes, which can be molded by the artisans living in the beach itself. We're talking about a circular economy at the coast, near to where the source material is produced. Things like keychains can have the tagline, this was from a beach in Langkawi, for example. So these add value to the actual material. And we are working with artisans who can take that material and turn it into craft pieces. On the other hand, we're also looking at taking this material and turning it into filaments. So we are mixing in PET, PP, and turning it into 3D printed filaments, which we are extruding, which we then, since we are a university, we have a very vibrant engineering and applied arts school, so they can turn this into works of art or works of for their prototyping users. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. So we're working with an NGO in Sabah, basically collecting rubbish which is in the ocean and then turning it into raw material. And the NGO working with is MRF. So currently they're trying to fight plastics, marine plastics, which are endangering turtles, natural habitats around Sabah. So what we're trying to do is trying to go into the community, take the raw material, give a monetary value to the waste, and then turn it into something their community can use. So we don't have to transport it. We don't want to bring trash or waste from one state into another state, right? That's the main thing. So we are using some technologies to detect it because let's face it, we need to know where to go to collect rubbish. We need a certain critical mass. So we're using drones and eVTOLs to do this. And this is basically a way of siphoning plastics from the ocean. This is one of our students' creations. So the idea is it's a propulsion device which is under the water. So if you go to any Malaysian island, you can see microplastics in the water. So the idea is this device basically serve as a filter inside the water, and then it harnesses it and can collect the microplastics. Next. So yeah, those are some efforts which we have taken. The project actually is in the stage of initiation. So we are talking with the British Council. So the idea is to have we call it as green plastic makerspace. We call it green plastic because the plastic is basically recycled plastic. We are talking about looking at all the different types of plastics we can find in the beaches and harnessing them for different use cases. So that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Narendra, don't go anywhere. I would like to ask all the speakers to come up here, and we take a couple of questions. If I may ask the organizers, can we stay a little bit longer? All right, so we have 15 minutes. Let's see here. Yeah, sit here. Right. All right, so I'll open the floor for questions. Perhaps I'll take 3 questions for now. And 1, 2, 3. Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for all your talks. They were really, really interesting. I was wondering how much talk there is in the anti-plastics planetary health community about the impacts of fast fashion and both human health and the environment. There are estimates putting it up to like 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions are due to the fast fashion industry. And at every stage of like a garment's life cycle, it has impacts on human health. And it's not something I hear that much about in particularly academia and yeah, spaces like this. So it'd be great to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, I'd like to take that question. Let's take another question, and we'll give the speakers the time to process. Bear with them.
Hi, I'm Jerry from Indonesia. Just a broad kind of questions for everyone, I guess. There's been such an overwhelming facts on excuse me, microplastics in food and its adverse impact on our health. There's so many publications. What's the holdup from the policy making? Why it has not made any changes, even when health practitioners have said it, multiple have said it. So I'm just wondering if what's the holdup? And the second one is on the alternative to plastics. Patents are very expensive, and also research and development are very expensive. And if a company have managed to create, let's say, a viable alternatives, the cost will be exuberant. Has there been any subsidies or any talks about, rather than providing subsidies to fossil fuel, for example, for the research and development on alternatives to plastics, has there any kind of like talk about providing subsidies, or is there anything available for research and development?
All right. I think we are going to take Gorka first. Yes.
Regarding your question, and maybe I will try to also answer your question about microplastics. There's at least from a analytical point of view, there is a problem that we don't know how to really detect them. So if we want to say, is there microplastic in this food? Yeah, there is no valid technology to really detect it. That is being validated, and then, so in my lab, microplastic is not included in any analytical technology that we have, and it probably will come soon. Yeah, and then it could be regulated, but something that we cannot really trustfully detect, we cannot say there is this limit if we cannot detect it. So it's very new, and it's a problem of also technology to detect it. Okay. Uh, about the other alternatives for packaging, well, I don't know. I'm not into politics, so I don't really know the details. And about um, the fast fashion, I think this comes also with what I've been speaking about, the need of packaging. The need of packaging is by the way we are, the market is placed, right? So I said that packaging is needed. Packaging is needed the way the market is planned today, right? But there is also other alternatives, like packaging is needed in the supermarket. But if you go to buy meat, that should be packed. But if you go to the butcher, there is not such a big need for packaging, right? So probably the same goes for the fashion. It's not maybe a problem of if fashion is polluting or not. It's a problem of, do we really need everything that we buy? Do we really need to buy something that is cheap because it has plastic and I will use more clothes? Or maybe I need to buy something that is better, more sustainable material, but I use it for 10 years, right? So that's also something we have to think about. It's not only, so some things that seem that are not, we cannot change the way the market is today, but also we can change the market so that we don't need those, right?
Anyone wants to add on?
I'll just add, thank you. I'll just add a few points. So on microplastics, so I believe selected countries in selected parts of the world have already begun introducing regulations to prohibit the use or ban, because in microplastics, there are two categories, right? The intentional use of microplastics, like your cosmetics and some of them. And then you have the unintended microplastics end up through the breakdown process of plastics, right? Many of which, as a colleague here has kindly represented. So there are some countries who have already started regulating it. There are countries who are currently considering, and they're discussing how do you identify which types should be or shouldn't be. So there are discussions going on. And thirdly, also at the global level, this is also an area of concern with respect to how can we standardize globally, A, the labeling, B, also what can be done without in terms of microplastics, which are intentionally added into products. Second question, when it comes to technology, right? So again, some countries have their innovation funds and so forth. But again, globally, when we speak about the plastics ecosystems, be it nature or be it the economy, when we are looking at technology, plastics came from different parts of the world. The innovation came from different parts of the world. So as we are moving forward and trying to find solutions, there needs to be a strong funding mechanism in place to enable technology transfer so that we can collectively benefit of the technologies that our fourth speaker earlier today was highlighting about, technologies to address plastic pollution or technologies to address alternative sources which are safe and sustainable and so forth. And lastly, when it comes to like fashion, so it's just a quick thought as well, right? So when we look at fashion and we look at plastics, so there is also a mild discord with respect to how we approach circular economy, right? So we think we want to put plastics back into the system. So there are also certain entities where they are collecting plastics, and plastics are being put into products such as clothes or in shoes and so forth. And sometimes the question then comes, what happens when these products meets its end of life, right? Because these products can also break down and form microplastics. So are we then identifying, someone talked about false solutions or temporary solutions which could create more problems in the past, in the future? Thank you.
Add a bit and then to end with you. Just on fast fashion, I'm also not aware of any like health explicitly health-based approaches to fast fashion, but I think that is the call to action. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. I remember I think it was last year that there was a campaign about how we are literally wearing oil because of the very, very strong links between the fast fashion and the fossil fuel industry. So I would say in a similar way that we are approaching the plastics crisis, we also need to be taking a health center approach to the fast fashion issue. And unless we create a platform for the health community and the fast fashion people who are addressing the fast fashion issue, that community to be in the same room to discuss, I think things would go forward. So I would say that a lot of what's happening in our work with the GPT, with the plastics, can be some kind of framework to approaching all of these different interconnected solutions as well. And then on the questions of microplastics, I think one of the other holdup is that there isn't really a clear, streamlined approach between all the stakeholders. It is such a it's a problem that's leaking everywhere, right? And it's a problem that also involves so many different stakeholders: environmental, the production side, consumer side, health side, everything. So I feel like we could also benefit from some kind of streamlined communication, maybe nationally for now, or locally or regionally, so that there's an opportunity to tackle this intersectionally. Because if it's just one department trying to solve a problem that is being impacted and impacts all of these different departments, it's not really going to work. And on that note, I also think the GPT presents quite a critical opportunity for us to bring forward this conversation and have clear regulations and policies in line to address the entire life cycle of plastics, but also microplastics. So we look for the outcomes of INC 4 and 5 and 6. But yeah, that might be one of the opportunities where we can tackle the microplastics issue.
All right.
On the alternatives for microplastics, actually there are a lot of technologies right now. The funding mainly comes, the EU has a fund for alternative packaging. I should know, I've actually applied for a few. We use primarily rice husk, palm oil husk, biomass-based materials to produce packaging. So we use resins and then we make biodegradable packaging. But the problem is the standards and the food safety stamps are not yet out. So they are still in review. And the EU is basically at the forefront, the EU and the US, as I know, but others are following suit. The prices, not as competitive, to be honest. Yeah, the prices are not too competitive, but there are a few alternatives that are very close. The main problem is because of the fact that procuring the raw material. If you talk about rice husk, getting that amount of rice husk to produce enough packaging material to substitute plastic, that's the problem, because there's no central repository. So that even in Malaysia, that's a huge problem, because we had a discussion before. What's the issue holding up using palm husk, basically, which is waste material? Is because there's no central place to collect it. No one wants to do it. And there's a cost involved in that. So this same situation reciprocates around the world when you talk about all these kind of packaging solutions here.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful presentations. Oh, we have one more question. Okay, one more. Just one more.
Thank you so much. I just wonder whether, because packaging, plastic food packaging it's used for different things, right? Some of it is very immediate food that we consume. Now, pre-plastics, which was not too long ago, I think, there were other things that we use, like leaves, right? A lot of that is practiced here. I don't know what they might have used in Europe, but these maybe we should go back to looking at those, the feasibility of those, and then also investing in growing those plants like banana trees and things which provide so many benefits. And if you look at the overall cost, it'll probably be much less. Now, my other thing is in terms of cost, right? Are we looking at costs properly? Because we are not including the societal costs that you talked about when we compare costs. We are not including the risks to human health when we look at these costs. So are we really comparing apples with apples, oranges with oranges, or not? That's a question. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful closing for for our session. It's not that we don't want to address. I think you are absolutely right. I think I started the introduction to this session by saying that there are different lenses to this problem. We can think about it as waste. We can think about it as pollution. But one of it perhaps is to think about the system and how to change the system. And perhaps one of the way to change the system is to start understanding that cost has to be measured as the cost for our health, but also to the planet. That probably convenience is not necessarily the most important thing when you are going to take food, but the most important thing is whether or not you're polluting the environment, etc. So I think with that idea that perhaps we need to start thinking differently and reshape the system, we can end up this session. I just want to thank you very much for the participants. I really thank you for preparing your presentations, looking for the facts, and presenting wonderful presentations. I hope that you enjoyed and that you learned. And if anything has not been yet fully discussed, we are here until Friday, so please feel free to approach us over coffee and we have further discussions. Thanks so much.